Alrighty, good evening, everybody. It's just coming up on about 7:30, so we'll get started just a second or two. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight for this webinar to learn about the new standards-based report card here in Franklin Square. My name is Maura Gallagher, and I am the Deputy Superintendent here in the Franklin Square School District, and I am happy to take a moment to introduce to you Mr. Jim Svensson, who is a colleague and a recently retired administrator from a local surrounding school district. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Svensson. Jim has worked closely with our report card committee to develop these report cards and to do the heavy lift that was required in order to get this job done. Tonight will be a webinar style presentation, and the chat feature will be available for you to enter questions as they come up throughout the course of the evening. Additionally, there is also a QR code at the end of the presentation that will bring you to a place where you can ask additional questions or put some comments in there, and then that information will be collated into an FAQ document that will at a later point in time be posted onto our website, along with a copy of this video presentation. Alrighty, so I'd like to take a minute to thank our district committee members who spent countless hours on this project of putting together updated report cards, standards-based report cards for grades kindergarten through grade 6. We had a host of teachers from across all grade spans and all 3 buildings that worked tirelessly on this project. So thank you to them. Many of them are probably on this call this evening joining us as well. So while we were putting this committee together, we went through a very intensive process to do our due diligence and to do our homework in terms of just putting the process together to get the right facts and do some research. So I'll just talk you through very briefly what the committee process looked like. We had a robust team of eager teachers participate. Mr. Jim Svensson conducted some staff development through his company, Svenducate Consulting. The teachers and participants on the committee read and shared many articles. They surveyed staff about what their thoughts were regarding the standards and the areas of focus that needed to be taken into consideration. The committee also reviewed many samples of standards-based report cards from around New York, not just Long Island, but a variety of report card samples from the state. There were a multitude of committee meetings to discuss not only the purpose of the report card, but to talk about levels of performance and a grading scale for both academic and non-academic areas. We talked about behaviors that promote learning, as well as the New York State standards and developing common assessments. So we talked a lot about the purpose of our report cards, just to kind of get you up to speed on what you might be asking yourself tonight. What is the actual purpose of a report card? So the committee determined that they really wanted this to the meaning behind this to offer a meaningful and comprehensive evaluation of students' academic growth, their social emotional development, learning habits, using a standards-based approach. The goal of the report card should be to highlight progress towards grade level standards, outlining strengths and areas for improvement. And it is designed to communicate performance effectively to help parents, guardians, and students understand a child's achievements and areas needing attention. So with that, I will take an opportunity now to turn it over to Mr. Jim Svensson, who will talk to you a little bit more in detail about what that looks like and to talk about traditional grading versus the standards-based movement that we went in.
Thank you, Maura.
Sure.
Can you see that chat screen on my screen?
I can see your presentation.
Right, and on top of the presentation, I have the chat. Is that there?
I do not see that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, and I'm so happy to be here today. It was a pleasure working with your committee and your teachers, dedicated and bright people who really had some incredible discussions and thinking and thought about how to put these report cards together. So it was really my pleasure to work with them. So what I have here is some grades that you may have seen as a student when you were younger, or maybe your own child's grades. But what I'd like you to do, if you have a chance to put in the chat, which student you would like to be. If you could choose one of them, which student would you like to be? Those are the grades that they got for the unit, for the yeah, the unit, the subject, call it whatever subject you want. So pick a student. You want to be number 1, number 4, number 6.
Okay, they're saying the chat is disabled, so let
Oh, okay. Then don't put it in the chat.
me.
Often people will pick like student number 6 because maybe started with a 0 but ended up with 100, and student 7. Some people like to pick the average person here, like the number 3. But the funny thing about this and the averages is all of these averages come to a 79, and in our old traditional way to C in our scoring. So it's funny when we look at these how they all become the same anyway. If we did median score, but it's interesting to see the median. There are differences, but we don't normally take median score in grading. And this happens a lot where you delete the lowest grade, and which gives a student a free chance to get to a different grade. These are all ways that people have done scoring. Median scoring is more at the college level, but these are ways that people have done scoring. So we're going to talk a little today about how this really doesn't work and it's not a fair system for students. So we have a long history of research on grading. This is not a new topic that's come up in education. These are 2 studies that I found, randomly. Study 1 was done by Starch and Elliott, and they were talking about the reliability of grading of high school work in English. And there were 2 papers scored by many different teachers. Paper 1, the range of scores by all those teachers were from a 64 to a 98. Now, this was just the same exact paper that they scored, not different ones. So one paper that one student wrote, and the range of the scores were from a 64 to a 98. And on paper number 2, from a 50 to a 97. So again, you can see the large range of scores based on different teachers' view of that paper. Then in study 2 by Hunter and Hunter Burmy, same kind of study, reliability of grading high school work in English. The difference in this study, though, is the teachers were trained 18 plus hours in the traits of writing. However, the results were not much different. If you look, they were from a 50 to a 96, even with all the training. Part of the reason is that because as we as teachers have our own view of what's expected in that piece. And that's why you see such a large range. People also rate some items of the paper higher than others. If the chat were working, I would ask you to tell me, guess what year these results were from. And what's really interesting is that the first one, study 1, was done in 1912. And then sadly, or not so sadly maybe, the second one was done 100 years later in 2011. But nevertheless, within those 99 years, we still have the same exact results. The range from 50 to 96, 97. So normally I'd ask you again in the chat, but there's a lot of you, so it would have taken a while. What makes a grade? And often when I ask that question, people say, attendance, grade, tests, assessments, participation, many different items. And when I asked the district teachers for that, these are some of the words that came up. And the larger words are the ones that people said mostly. Effort was a big one, tests, luck, projects, participation, observations. That would be teachers' observations. Behavior came up. These are all things that people feel and that we grew up with being part of our grade in school. The one part of that's not the hardest to understand, but the most difficult to adjust to is that in standards-based grading, we don't use attendance and behavior or extra credit when we grade students. we can, when you do that, when we don't do that, students actually grapple with the idea of quality and walk away with a higher degree of self-sufficiency. We can and should we do report about information about attendance and effort and participation, but we report it separately from the academic achievement. So in other words, what a student does in science and is able to demonstrate that they know in science, that should be what their grade is based on. The standards in science, and are they able to show us, demonstrate that they understand it. If they can demonstrate that, but didn't do a great job on their homework or didn't do all of their homework, that homework should not affect the grade on the science. There should be a place where we evaluate homework, but not having to do with the science grade. And that's because in education, and this happens often, we do what was done to us. So if we were graded like that and we were taught like that, it's okay to do that the same in 100 years later. And I would hope that when we know better, we start to do better, and we should do better. We should be expected to do better when we know better. So Doug Reeves, he's a famous researcher, argues that we need to do a better job of basing grades on student performance other than subjective factors less related to achievement. So in order to do this, we need a grading system that is, one, accurate. The grade must reflect the academic performance of the student. And the key there is academic performance of the student. It has to be fair. The grade must not be influenced by factors such as effort, participation, attendance, and in the larger picture even, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and such. Those things should not be influencing a grade. It's what your performance should be that influences the grade. It should be specific. The grade should be specific enough to provide information to help improve the student's performance, and also to help us understand how we can help the student improve his performance or her performance. And it should be timely. Students must receive a steady stream of feedback to help them improve their performance. In elementary school, timely is not really the largest issue. Generally, teachers, within a day have a test or a result, or those results coming back quickly. But it should be timely, and it should be given to the student in a timely manner. So I'm going to show you a short video that gives you some understanding of what standards-based grading is, and then we'll come back.
When the focus of grading is to give clear feedback and help the student take ownership over his own learning, it becomes a truly useful tool. All too often, we forget the focus of grading. We give a grade to show a student what he did in the past, but forget to connect that to what he can do going forward. As teachers, we found that using standards-based grading enabled us to stay focused on giving more meaningful feedback to our students. Standards-based grading, or SBG, helps teachers do three things. 1. Learning goals. Standards-based grading helps us focus on the learning goals of our class. SBG is a grading system that focuses on the content, skills, or standards that students must learn. This means that when recording scores, the concern is not with a cumulative grade on a test, but rather the level of mastery the student has achieved on each concept assessed on that test. With that slight change, patterns begin to appear in the classroom as a whole and for individual students. The class may be struggling with a particular concept and may require the teacher to revise her instruction, or a student may show a pattern of weakness with a particular skill which can be individually addressed. 2. Assessments. Standards-based grading forces us to look at our curriculum and make sure that each activity, test, and project has a purpose. With a clear idea of each learning goal, we can be more intentional about what each activity is for. When creating tests, we know exactly which skills need to be assessed. Existing homework assignments or activities that don't aid or assess any learning goals are clearly not necessary. 3. Feedback. Standards-based grading helps us give better feedback to our students. Once the goals of the class are clear, we can be clear with students about how well they were mastering the content. We used to say you must earn an 82% on the final to pass. With SBG, we can say, you just need to focus on using clear evidence to support your claims. The focus is on skills instead of points. Standards-based grading is an assessment and feedback method that helps teachers stay focused on the goals of the class, align all parts of the curriculum to the course goals, and give students specific, actionable feedback about their strengths and weaknesses.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. So I hope that gives a slight understanding of standards-based grading and its advantages, and we'll continue with some other ideas. So benefits of standards-based grading reporting system. Measure what students should know and be able to do by the end of each grade in the learning area. Identify the concepts and skills in each learning area based on these standards. Reflect students' specific skills and knowledge, allowing parents to have detailed information about acquired skills, including areas of strength and areas for growth, and where additional instruction and support may be needed. It aligns the Franklin Square curriculum to the state standards. Students, parents, and teachers work together towards shared goals to ensure that students make progress toward grade level standards. Students will understand what is expected to master goals for a particular subject area, and parents will be better able to support their child's learning at home. And teachers across the district will have common expectations and understandings about learning targets at each grade level, and teachers will build upon those prior learning targets and levels of expected student mastery from the prior year. So when we talked about, when we went back to the student we were picking, this is the difference. In a traditional system, here's a student that had a 40, a 50, a 92, 98, 100, and a 98. And in our traditional systems now, the average would come to a 78 and just be an average score, a C. But in standards-based, when we look at a 40 and a 50, so clearly the student had some difficulty in the beginning of the unit, but then started to pick it up, 92, a 98, 100, and a 98. In this case, the student has mastered the standard. And what happened here at the 40 and 50 should not affect the fact that he knows or she knows what she needed to know at the end of the unit. That's the key. So the student has mastered the information. So standards-based reporting provides accurate information and feedback on students' progress toward meeting end-of-year grade level standards. Reflects students' skills and knowledge, allowing parents to have detailed information about the acquired skills. And reflects student current skills and knowledge, not an average. So this was your traditional report card, mathematics, A. It doesn't give a lot of information. What a standards-based report card would look like is this. Mathematics, I can define number sentences. I have a 2. I can solve number sentences that have brackets and so on. Here I'm a little stronger in solving number sentences and patterns with using 2 rules. So you see the difference here. You get more specific information about where your child is at a certain point of the year. So together with the teachers at our committee meetings, we spent a good deal of time on the purpose of the report card and looking at the samples and so on and so forth. But we also spent a great deal of time picking the priority standards. There are many New York State standards. And if you had a report card with all of them, it would be cumbersome and incredibly large. So with the teachers, we picked the priority standards, the standards that are most important to use on a report card. It doesn't mean, and I don't want anyone to think that we're not teaching the other standards, but those other standards build into these standards that we chose. So it doesn't have to have a grade on its own. So priority standards were done by a number of different ways. And which skills or content area knowledge within the discipline will last beyond this course or grade level. So those are endurance standards and standards that carry over from year to year. Like an easy way to look at that is in math. Once we start addition, that's a really important standard in grades 1 and 2. And we focus a lot on that because it's endurance. We need addition and subtraction as we continue with multiplication and division. And so those are endurance standards. And are they interdisciplinary? This is leverage standards. Many ELA standards, for example, are also included in social studies. So those are leverage standards. We include some of them in the ELA, and we include some in social studies, so that we're getting the standard in both areas, but we're only actually assessing or giving a grade in one of them. Teachers' insights about the standards and their importance in the curriculum and/or sequence for this grade. Teacher judgment. Our teachers, your teachers have been teaching many years in the grade level, and there's many minds coming together, and they know best what needs to be done, what's most important, and what builds upon others. They know better than anybody because they're doing it on a yearly basis and a day-to-day basis. And then are we able to measure these standards with consistency, validity, and reliability, as we talked about before? And those are the assessment standards. The standard that we put, are we able to assess it so that we have a fair understanding of where your child is?
Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
So this slide here talks about and gives you an overview of what you'll actually be seeing on the standards-based report card for academic areas. You'll notice at the bottom, we have an NA. Anything that's grayed out would be not applicable at this time. Then there would be NM for not meeting, which is where a student would not yet be meeting grade level standards. Progressing with support would be PS, which is where a student is progressing towards meeting the grade level standards with frequent support. Progressing is progressing towards meeting the grade level standard with minimal support. And then meeting is obviously consistently and independently meeting grade level standards. Jim, did you want to talk a little bit about your bicycle analogy?
Yeah, so one of the ways to really understand standards-based grading is thinking about teaching your child to ride a bicycle. So when they started riding, well, before they even started riding a bicycle, right? Here it is against the tree. That's an NA. It's not applicable at this time. It's not fair to say he can't or she can't because we haven't even started yet. So it's not NA. And then when we're not meeting, when we're using training wheels and when we're just starting to learn to sit on it and pedal, we're not quite meeting that standard yet because the standard at the end of the year is that they're riding a bicycle independently and consistently on their own. So as we move along the time, progressing with support, this is, happens to be a dad, but it could be a mom or a dad helping the student to pedal without the training wheels. So we go from training wheels to without training wheels with an adult helping, and then we're progressing. And these two are both progressing to riding the bicycle independently and consistently. And then when you see meeting, you see, and I think, just based on the picture, you can see that this student is certainly meeting it more because they're able to, you can see they're going faster, they're making turns. So they're consistently independently meeting the point of riding a bicycle. And advanced here, we have people doing jumps and flips, and I don't know what this guy's doing. And those advanced works would be noted in teachers' comments because these are two different levels of advanced.
Great. And then on this slide, we have here for you an overview of the personal, social behaviors and work habits for a variety of the grade levels, and then also the behavioral expectation and special area standards for meeting, progressing, and not meeting. And then obviously for grades 3 through 6, we would have those diagnostics there in terms of the student's performance in terms of different behavioral components. And then grade K would also be inclusive. They made a special request to include fine motor skills, using scissors correctly, and holding and controlling writing and coloring tools appropriately.
So some principles of a standard-based grading. Reporting should be based on clearly specific learning goals and performance standards. So that's what you'll see on the report card when you get them, that they'll be clear and specific. All students in the same grade level at Franklin Square Public Schools, no matter their school, will be evaluated using the same standards. That's important. Every school is going to be in the same place. Evidence used for grading should be valid. Students are assessed on what they are taught. Grading is based on established criteria, not arbitrary norms. So hopefully without arbitrary norms, we're not getting the range from 50 to 96 on a writing piece. Students are graded on the standards assessed, not on arbitrary norms such as poor handwriting or no name on the paper and such. Grading is based on a variety of measures. It's on teacher observations, classroom performance, conferences with students, as well as formative assessments. It's a total avoidance of grading based on averages. Teachers will shift from traditional grading system determined by test averages to standards-based grading, which is based on progress towards mastery of a grade level standard. Reflect students' current skills and knowledge, not an average. Focus on progress and report other factors separately. The report card is divided into 3 sections, as Maura mentioned earlier. So what does an M indicate when you get an M? An M indicates that the student is consistently and independently meeting the grade level expectation or standard at that point in the year when formal instruction and assessment related to all aspects of that standard has occurred. Now, some of the standards are end-of-year expectations, and a student might not be able to receive an M until the end of the year. However, as we all know, Franklin Square has many bright and intelligent students. So it's not a rule that it's an end of the year. If a student has met the end-of-year expectation in December for a particular standard, he or she should get the M at that point. Then the teacher's comment should indicate how they plan or already are challenging and stretching the student in that standard. Every student progresses at his or her own rate toward mastery of a standard, and your child's teacher would notify you of any concerns about your child's progress, just like they do now. So as an M example. So for a possible 3rd grader, a descriptor in math might be knows from memory the product of 2 one-digit numbers. So teacher gives instruction and formal assessment on this standard in the first marking period. When the pre-assessment, formal instruction assessment at the end of the year learning target has occurred and the student consistently and independently demonstrates mastery of that standard, the student would receive an M. That might be immediate for some students, as we know that they come into 3rd grade knowing their multiplication tables. In the meantime, most likely, most students will be at P for progressing or PS progressing with support. And we all know that there's some students that are always that might be still struggling with addition or subtraction facts, and they're not even ready to begin working on multiplication facts. That student might still be a P or a PS in some areas of math, but an NM not meeting in the standard above at that time. Again, a discussion with you, the parent, and the teacher would have probably already happened to discuss these weaknesses and then make a plan on how working with that child to meet that standard. A P means progressing indicates that your child is meeting the expectations of that standard at that point in the school year. Many of the standards are taught and assessed over multiple marking periods. As an example, so we have a 5th grader, and this might be a descriptor for literacy, determines the theme using details from a text. The student might be able to determine the theme. However, he or she is having difficulty providing details from the text or is reading and responding to the material that is below grade level. So in this case, the student is progressing, but still needs instruction and support to do it consistently and independently, and at a particular grade level expectation. The reasons for this would need to be indicated in the comment for the student, and the evidence for this would be able to be provided. So a teacher would be able to show you, this is what Jimmy's doing, and this is why he's at a P and not an M, or at a PS and not a P. So even if the 5th grader is reading at a 7th grade reading level, he or she may still need support in certain areas of the standards. He or she could be an M in some of the standards and a P in some standards. A good example is the difference between fiction and nonfiction reading. Sometimes students are stronger with fiction than they are with nonfiction. So in this fiction, they might be an M, but in nonfiction reading, they might be a P. Not meeting the standard is not progressing toward the standard yet. This means that the student may need extra time, experience, and/or intervention for concepts, processes, and skills to be developed toward progressing and eventual mastery. Areas with this indicator NM would require further discussion with you and should be indicated in the comment. So the difference between not meeting and progressing with support toward the standard means your child is at the beginning of working towards meeting the expectations of the standard at that point in the school year, but requires more direct one-on-one or small group support. And the difference between progressing with support and progressing towards support means towards a standard means that your child is working towards meeting the expectations of that standard at that point in the school year, but requires more practice and is able to do most of that practice without a lot of additional support. And the difference between an indicator of progressing towards the standard and meeting the standard, progressing towards the standard means your child is adequately meeting the expectations of a standard at that point in the school year. So if we go back to the multiplication example, yeah, a child might be really good with the digits up to 6, but is still working on 7, 8, and 9. So they would be progressing because they haven't quite gotten to 7, 8, and 9 yet. Even though it may have been there may have been some instruction on it. Meeting the standard means the child meets all of the criteria of the end of year grade level standard at that point in the year. So we do have one more little video to show you because we think it gives you a good idea of how a child moves through these standards and how the progress goes. I just want to give a heads up. This video doesn't use your criteria, what word am I thinking of more?
Rubric.
Yeah, the rubric, like, meeting, progressing with support, not meeting. It uses numbers, but I think you can get the idea when you look at how it goes.
Why do projects ship faster on Miro? Is it because it's the innovation workspace? Is it because of its AI-powered
This has
canvas?
nothing to
Is
do
it
with it.
because teams stay on the same page from idea to outcome? Yeah, all three. Innovation belongs on the canvas. Innovation belongs on Miro.
Standards-based grading is an innovation in education that focuses on student learning and helps increase achievement. Instructional techniques in standards-based classrooms better engage students and foster positive learning environments. Rather than tracking a single overall grade, subjects are broken down into many smaller learning targets. Each target is a teachable concept students should master throughout the course. Learning targets are written in student-friendly language, so students can understand and participate in their learning. They link back to rubrics, which give concrete guidance on each target. As students work on activities, they can self-assess their progress. Teachers provide specific feedback to help students improve. Education becomes a conversation about skills, allowing students to engage in and take ownership of the process. In traditional grading, this sort of feedback is possible, but less common. One score per assignment does not provide enough information for deep student engagement. While some good teachers do give helpful feedback, the structure of a traditional classroom makes it difficult. Scores in standards-based grading usually range from 1 to 4, reflecting a ladder of mastery, increasing in complexity. At the bottom, students have no understanding of a topic. As students learn, they climb up a rung as they gain basic understanding. They keep climbing until they reach the target. Standards-based grading data makes differentiated instruction easier to implement. When teachers have mastery information readily available, they can dynamically group students and give them level-appropriate lessons. Students at level 1 get activities to help them reach level 2. Level 2 students get activities to climb to level 3. Classrooms break into smaller groups with students working independently on activities intended for their skill level. With relevant instruction, students are more engaged in their learning. They can see their efforts result in growth, reinforcing work ethic and good habits. Sometimes students take multiple attempts to move up the ladder. In standards-based grading, students can try and retry as they work toward the targets. High-stakes tests are replaced with multiple opportunities to demonstrate mastery. This creates an emotionally safe environment where failure is temporary. Fear is removed from the classroom, encouraging students to stretch themselves, make mistakes, and learn. We hope you've enjoyed this.
So I hope you can see that how that it's also similar to the bicycle riding. When you start, you don't know, and then you move up the ladder, or you continue to learn to ride the bicycle, better.
Thanks, Jim. So we're at a point in the presentation where we would like to show you a draft of the model report card. This sample is for grade 1. Jim, I'm not sure if you're able to make this a little bigger.
I don't.
Okay, no problem.
I not.
So that's okay. It's the format in terms of aesthetics look very similar to our previous report cards. You will notice that the standards here are listed for each of the ELA areas, and then for literacy, listening and speaking, writing, literacy, foundational skills. Then we have the mathematics section that has each of the domains for the math areas based on the standards, as well as social studies and science. Science, the focus is, I know there were a couple of questions in the Q&A regarding science. Our science is focusing more on an inquiry-based approach to the state standards, where we're also incorporating the science investigations in grades 3 through 6. Some data collection and addressing the cross-cutting concepts and the science and engineering practices. And then if you have specific questions about that, you can also refer to our pacing guides where it outlines for you the curriculum that is going to be covered for each trimester. And then on the right-hand side, we also have the social skills key, as well as some of the special area subjects. So the actual layout of the report card is extremely similar to what we've utilized in the past. This is a primary example. And then Jim, I think the next one that we have is grade 5, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, this is page 1 of grade 5.
Page 1 of grade 5. Again, the ELA is on the left with the listening, writing, and literacy standards. And then we have the math, social studies, and science along with the academic standards here. The attendance for the marking periods up on the right. And then the second page is the same, just with a little bit of change regarding the actual, the behavioral components, which we have the social skills key there for meeting, progressing, as well as not meeting. And then you would have on the right-hand side any academic intervention services, if that was applicable to your particular child, and then teacher comments underneath that as well. So the overall format in terms of the aesthetics and what you're looking at are the same. It's just really the alignment with the New York State standards and picking out those core primary standards that Jim referred to earlier in the presentation. So as Jim mentioned earlier, change is always scary, but it's good and it moves us in the right direction. We, as the slide says, grew up in schools that use letters and numbers on report cards. And at that point in time, it was believed to be the best system. And it was what people could kind of understand and wrap their heads around. But the movement now is really into moving us into the direction of a standards-based grading system where it is fairer and more user-friendly system. It takes time to get used to it for all of us, our teachers. This is new to them as well. We've been working on it as a committee and sharing that information out with grade level partners. It will be an adjustment for students and parents as well. If you're wondering at all about like how does this correlate over to high school? Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about the process that you went through? Because I know that some people in 6th grade transitioned to private schools that would like to have grades historically, as well as some high schools. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your experience has been in some of the conversations that we've had?
Yeah, so absolutely. When I was in New Hyde Park when we did this, one of our sister districts, and we, our board was concerned about that and asked me to research that with all the local schools, the local private schools, and of course our own high school district, and all of them were very much prepared. Our high school was very much in favor. They had no problem with it, and they were prepared to, use the information that we give them to prepare students for high school and on towards college. And the private schools also, many of the districts that they take students from were already using standards-based grading. So they had already developed a system where they use the standards-based grading and use that information to, together with the test that they give to accept or not accept a student. So all areas, and that we checked with Kellenberg, we checked with Chaminade, we checked with all of them, and they all said the same thing, that they were very comfortable with it.
Thanks, Jim. So I just want to thank everybody for your time. We're coming up a little bit on the 40-minute mark. Some people have quick questions in the chat that I did respond to or verbally exchanged a conversation, responded here. We also have a thought exchange survey that will be available to you. You can either, you could use your phone to just scan this QR code, and that will bring you to a survey that you can fill out. And then based on the information that is provided to us in the survey, that will help me to kind of put together a Q&A or an FAQ document that can provide you with some additional information if you have some thoughts that you might be wondering about. This presentation will also be placed on our website in addition to the FAQ document that gets generated once we have an opportunity to kind of sort through your survey information and provide you with additional information should you need that. And I just want to thank you for your time. And I know that you have parent-teacher conferences coming up in the very near future next week. We have a half day on Tuesday. And report cards will be coming out in early December. So I wish you all the best of holidays coming up. And if you have any questions at any time, please do not hesitate to reach out. Jim, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think I hope we covered it all, and I hope you have a good understanding of it. And we'll be happy to look at all your questions and come back with some answers.
Thank you so much for your partnership, Jim. And thank
Thank
you
you.
all parents for your participation. Thank you.